When you joined, you didn't join with Alder, did you? All right, everyone. Hope you enjoyed your lunch. If not, under rain. Apparently, rain in California, Northern California, which is weird, but hey, it's not over here, so enjoy it. Yeah, we like the rain. Anyways, as we continue to the second half of the day, we have another amazing talk. Red teamers, if you're a red teamer, this is the place you want to be. So enjoy it. So I'll have Drew introduce himself and take it away.
Everyone can hear me okay? Cool. Yeah, so my name is Drew. I'm going to be talking about exploiting HTTP host headers. So a little bit about me. I'm a cybersecurity consultant at FishNetFox. I do web application, internal, external penetration testing. I've done adversary simulation in the past as well. And I've done a lot of cloud in the last few months. Previously, I did consulting for government agencies before moving to FishNetFox. I have several years of offensive cybersecurity experience, a few certifications, a couple CVEs. Because most importantly, all the talks I'm going to talk about, all the attacks I'm going to talk about, I've actually identified in real engagements, so they are very applicable. So a quick overview of what we're going to cover today. I'm going to start with the basics of what a request and response is, and what those headers actually are. Then we're going to jump into the source vulnerability, which is called path poisoning. Then we're going to talk a little bit about this header redirection and path poisoning. Then we're going to talk about password reset poisoning, markers in the header. Then I'm going to touch on some other header attacks you can exploit. And then I'm going to have a start Q&A. I brought a few vision spots along. So if you're interested in one of them, just answer these questions. And then I'll link some additional resources in up on the topic yourself. So who here is familiar with these questions? Cool. Most of you. So it's pretty straightforward, right? I have an example request here. Reach. Cool. So we got the host here. This is what we're going to talk about. We have get home with the get parameter of through being sent via HTTP2, and then some other additional information such as user agent, and other stuff that I'm going to talk about today. And then we also have to respond, okay, you can use that application to receive the response and everything normally, date, time, content, whatever. And then we also have the active body of the response. Displaying essentially vulnerable.com and content on that site. So those headers are part of the request, right? Vulnerable.com. And they're mandatory part of the request. So every request you send to the client is going to have to include a header. And they're used for providing information about the proper recipient of the request. So you can think of situations like where or virtual hosting, where there may be multiple applications on the server, and you want to make sure that you have the right host reaching your request. Now, there's something called forwarded header. I'm not going to get into that about what forwarded header is because I am on a time limit and frankly, it's pretty boring. So forwarded headers are additional headers that can provide information about the request to the server. So popular ones are X44, forwarded, X-forwarded post, XTTP override, etc. But those will be important when we talk about vulnerability. Now, I want to talk about red hat poisoning. So before we talk about red hat poisoning, I have to talk about what red hat is. Who here is familiar with red hat? Cool. So red hat is pretty straightforward. It's used as a temporary resource for And it helps speed up the delivery of the users. So the request that you send from a user, you have a user over there, and you'll actually hit the cache before going to the application. Now, if the cache is empty, you'll actually hit the application with the cache that's request. So the application is then send a request to the cache and say, hey, can you store this response in your cache any other request? And then it'll send it back to the user. And in that way, any other user trying to actually get the same response back from the client can use those requests in the cache instead of the application. So it's kind of going to be important for us to actually identify what the are if we want to perform that task. So there's something called unkey inputs. These are part of the requests that are not required for caching. You can think of stuff like maybe user agent, maybe accept language, or some other headers in there that are not required to be caching process. And there's a tool called Foray Miner, which is a Burp Suite add-on that can help identify the required parameters and headers for the caching process. This will print out a bunch of different headers as well as parameters, and then it'll save the responses for you, and then you have to manually compare the responses to see if there's any difference between the requests. Additionally, you can look at the HTTP response at the very headers to see if there is sorry, guess I wasn't speaking enough. To see if there may be additional headers required for the cache queue. And then servers will often respond in the HTTP response with an indicator on whether or not the request is stored in the cache. So you can think of stuff like text cache mix, cache control, age, server timing, etc. And then the last concept I want to cover here is cache clusters. And these are actually used to avoid hitting the cache. So if we're testing payloads, we don't want to be hitting the cache. And one way we confirm that is by using a non-existent get parameter to ensure we don't actually hit the cache. We can use other things such as trying to change the HTTP method, but cache clusters are generally the best way to do it. So it'd just be a non-existing get parameter, which would be here. So web cache poisoning cross-site script. Now this is one of the most common ways to perform web cache poisoning, and it's done like this. Applications may take post headers or forwarded headers and actually use them to build HTML links in the response. So by using a cache cluster, which is just a get parameter that doesn't exist, param equals 5, we can avoid hitting the cache since this response will not be cached already. Now we have inserted an exported for header, which is not part of the normal request, and we set it to 127.0.0.1. And then when we look at the response, we actually see that it will be reflected back to us. Under here, HTTP 127.0.1. So since this is an type, we can just break out of it. Just use an SVG onload alert document.domain, and we can perform a cross-site scripting payload. So that's pretty easy to perform, and now we can confirm that this is actually working by getting it from a clean session. So now our web cache poisoning attack looks like this. We have our malicious request using a cache cluster to ensure we don't hit the cache being sent to the application. Now the application is sending the request back and storing it in the cache. Now from a clean session, not using the same session token, authorization, or whatever, clean session, we're actually requesting it from the user and making sure we're hitting the cache using the same cache cluster, and then sending it back, and we're seeing if the cross-site scripting actually falls. So that was pretty straightforward, but what happens if there's multiple caches? Now, a lot of applications will implement caches since it's used to speed up the delivery of resources. So we're going to have to think of ways to actually hit different caches. So in our example here, we hit one cache, but now a user is going to another cache, and we want to make sure we have the most impact as possible for our vulnerability. Well, the easiest way to do this is caches are usually based off of IP geolocation to ensure the fastest delivery to customers. So we can just spin up cloud resources in multiple regions to try and hit multiple caches. You can think of things like EC2, Lambda, Compute Engine, VMs for Azure, anything you're most comfortable with that can be spread across multiple regions. You can also use VPNs if you want to, but this would probably be pretty resource intensive. So I'd probably recommend using cloud resources. Now, this will take a lot of trial and error to hit all the caches. And what I mean by that is, imagine you set up an EC2 in US East 1, and then you send a request, a malicious request out, which we did. Let's go back a page, and we send out this request from US East 1. And we send it, and we confirm that from US East 1, it's actually poison. Now, if we send out another request, spin up another EC2 in Southeast, or maybe we want to go on the West Coast, and we send it to the cache, we can see if it's poisoned or not. That will give us a general idea of where these caches are, where these caches ranges are actually set. So that's where the trial and error is going to come in. You're going to have to spin up different resources in different locations to identify how many caches may exist. So now, if we've done all that with all the trial and error, and we have our malicious request ready, we can send it off from every known location to the application itself. We'll talk about how we can actually hit the application in a moment, but we have figured out how to actually infect each cache that the application may be using. Now, how do we actually ensure that our requests will be cached? Well, we can play around with the headers. We can try and make sure our request is being sent, but usually what will happen is caches will have some sort of expiration. And once that expiration has hit, it could be 2 minutes, 5 minutes. I think AWS allows up to 24 hours. The first request being sent will usually be cached. So we're going to want to make sure we're the first request in. So I wrote a pretty simple script to ensure we're the first request in. And I do that by just sending a bunch of requests at the same time. So in this script, we have our HTTPS warmable.com domain, and then we can set as many headers as we want. So in this example, we're sending an export to header to script alert 1, another header to attacker.com for post. And then I also included a proxy option, since I like to filter all my traffic through Verb. No verified SSL in case it's using insecure SSL TLS, which we'll be using. Max workers, so writing it, so 15 threads. And I also added a sleep object if I don't actually want to keep off the server. So now that we've talked about web cache posing, there's another kind of host header attack I'm going to have to speak about for you to get the full grasp of web cache posing. And this is host header redirection. So by altering the host header and by inserting forwarded headers, we can actually perform redirects on an application. Now, this isn't always going to be the case. It's going to be highly dependent on whether or not they filter out host headers properly and forwarded headers. And in my experience, I've most commonly seen this on pages that are already performing to redirects. So by viewing the response from the server, we can tell if the application is redirecting properly. So in this case, I'm calling get redirect HTTP/2, and I've overwritten the host header to attacker.com. I've inserted 2 other exported headers, and then I see in the response it's actually attacker.com. So I'm able to actually redirect the site. But this is kind of low impact, right? I can't force every client request to actually have this in. I had to manually go in and alter this request. Well, you may actually be able to chain web cache posing and host header redirection. Now, this is something I have found a few times. It doesn't happen every time you get these 2 vulnerabilities together, but it is possible to chain them together. So using how we know web cache posing works, in addition to a host header redirection attack, we can force users to load malicious pages of our choosing. So we can control the redirection of however we want. And again, it's going to be dependent on how the application actually works. Just because you have both of these vulnerabilities doesn't mean it's going to work. You're going to have to play around. So we have our victim here, he's trying to explode a redirect on vulnerable.com. We're able to successfully redirect him away to hacker.com. So I know that's a lot to digest, so I wrote out a quick attack. So our first step is to insert post headers and forwarded headers on the HTTP request and look for potentially overriding values or redirects. Next, we're going to have to identify if caching is actually used on the target. If caching is not used, then we're kind of stuck. You know, the whole point of this is to poison the cache. Next, we're going to want to identify the unkeyed inputs for the caching mechanism so we can craft our malicious payload successfully. Next, we want to use cache clusters to confirm that the payload is actually being stored in the cache. We don't want to be hitting the cache just yet, or we don't want to be hitting the cache, the real cache yet. We want to be using cache clusters to have a fake request being stored. Next, we're going to want to identify global caches to spread the impact as far as possible. Clients want to hear what the impact of this vulnerability is. You can only affect 10 to 20 users, then they'll be less likely to patch it. If you say any user going to this page will hit our web cache poisoning attack, they'll be more likely to listen. And then our final step is going to be flooding with malicious requests using a script, right? You can just put it in a while true, which is pretty much what I did. And just keep sending the request to make sure that the site is continuing to be poisoned. Now, what are the impacts of web cache poisoning? Well, we talked about cross-site scripting, and I'm sure most of us know what cross-site scripting is and how we can actually perform attacks like section writing and stealing authentication tokens using cross-site scripting. But the redirection is one that I have more fun with. Now, we can perform attacks like credential phishing. We can mimic the login page since users won't be expecting the redirect and actually have them authenticate to our own page. The second one is one that I've theorized for internal web cache poisoning. Please don't do it on external sites, that would be illegal. But for an internal site, we can try and perform some malware distribution. Now, internal users trying to access an internal site would be very trusting of that internal site because, well, their team probably set it up. But if we can overwrite the site and have a, oh, please download this software, but it's actually our malware prompt in it, then we can perform lateral movement pretty easily doing that. Again, internal only, external, you don't know who's going to hit it. The last one, service disruption, is one I didn't really touch on, but I want to throw it up here. If you can cause a bad response, so you think of like a HTTP 500 internal server error as a bad response, and have that be stored in the cache, then you can perform a service disruption, denial service, whatever you want to call it, attack. So really with web cache poisoning, we hit everything from confidentiality to integrity to availability for web cache poisoning. Any questions? I know it's a lot covered. Cool. So that's web cache poisoning. Now we're going to talk about a few easier attack paths. Password reset poisoning. So password resets, I'm sure we're all aware, are part of applications where users can reset their passwords. So by manipulating the post header, it's maybe possible to actually change the password reset link that is sent to users. So you can think of cases like this, server HTTP host, you can use it in the HTTP application, which will just take the HTTP host to formulate the link. Now, this is more commonly seen on distributed software, open source software, since the link may vary from whoever sets it up. So in our attack here, we're sending a post request to reset password HTTP2, and we've changed the host header. And then in the body, we actually have to set who we're sending the password reset to. We are performing this attack ourselves. We're not actually hoping the victim will change the host header. We have to send the email out. So we said victim@vulnerable.com, and then the email they receive is the normal body of the email. It's just hello, reset your password, whatever the normal body says. But then the link itself is actually going to be updated. So what can we do with this attack? Well, obviously you can perform credential phishing, but are users going to trust the password reset that you send? Probably not. They didn't initiate the password reset, most people have heard of phishing, even people who aren't very technical have heard of phishing, and they know not to click any links. But the advantage you have with password reset poisoning is that the email being sent is actually from a legitimate company or website or whatever you're sending it from. So the easiest way to trick the user into thinking they need to reset their password is send a fake email first saying, "We have been breached, please reset your password." And then the password email reset after that. That will panic users into actually performing the password reset, and then you can perform credential harvesting that way. Now, the next one, password reset token harvesting, is a bit of an interesting one. Since you can try and capture the log traffic from malicious sites to password reset token, most password reset tokens will be stored in a file parameter in my experience. So if you're able to actually capture the password reset token, you can use it on the legitimate site. Now, this may have some setbacks, such as users, again, aren't expecting this email. They may click it after the password reset token has expired. And the last one is if you can't really perform the first two, you can perform a user enumeration by using potentially subdomains or any other identifiable information you want of users who click on the link, and then you're able to perform brute forcing attacks on the users who have found valid. Any questions so far? Cool. So this is going to be the last one I'm going in depth about. Then I'll just touch on other host header attacks because there are quite a few. Log poisoning via the host header. So if you don't have redirection or password reset poisoning or overriding values, you still don't really know what's going on downstream when you alter the host header. And this is why I have been reporting any host headers, any website that accepts arbitrary host header values as at least an informational finding, simply because we don't know what's going on downstream since we don't usually have access to the logs. So if we don't have access to the logs and we haven't identified web cache poisoning, password reset poisoning, SSRF, authentication bypass, whatever you want to call it, you can always just submit arbitrary values into the host header and hope that downstream is breaks. So in this case, we're going to talk about log. So large networks may actually log the host headers to easily identify which website is making said calls. So in this example here, we're logging the host header and the forwarded header. So I've succumbed to arbitrary values of PHP and a cross-site scripting payload, and I've submitted them here, which are then being populated in the logs. Now, what can you do with log poisoning? Well, not really point of the talk, log injection, parsing errors for DOS. You can perform log infusion to try and hide malicious activities, but log injection has its own huge thing behind it. But just be aware of the impacts if you're trying to write a report and you're explaining, well, this is why you shouldn't accept arbitrary host headers because it may show up in your logs. Know what actually can happen in practice. So that's all the ones I want to cover in depth. But there are many, many other host header attacks out there. Probably most popular one, the ones I didn't talk about, is SSRF, having it cause unintentional outbound requests. You can also try and perform authentication bypass by setting the host header to localhost or some internal IP address. You may be able to bypass the authentication mechanisms. You can perform self-cross-site scripting, so similar to the web cache one, but it won't be stored in the web cache. I want you to do with self-XSS for the most part, but good proof of concept. And the last one is one I read up on in theory and how other people performed it using a session hijacking or session fixation attack. So, hang on. Everyone know what a DigiSpark is? No one? So DigiSparks are like rubber duckies. You can program the USBs, they're still sealed, so don't worry. You can program them to do whatever you want. You have other questions? If you get one, ask me. but just whoever I see raise their hand first, I'll call on. Name 4 types of post header attacks. Come on, guys, it wasn't that hard. Yes.
You're not alone. We all got you.
Yep. Anyone else have an idea? You want to help them? Yep. Perfect. So we got web cache poisoning, log poisoning, password reset poisoning.
You just use ChatGPT.
Cool. Self-process scripting is also one. I only have 4 of these, so. You want to hand out those 4? Okay, so those are all these sparks. If you guys got questions on them, but if anyone else is curious of this, who wants to answer what the purpose of Cache Buster is for no reward?
So you can, so your request doesn't get cached.
So you don't hit an already cache. Yeah, exactly.
Right, get voice of the character. By
Exactly. Very good. And does anyone want to give me an example of an impact that we've covered today for any of the attacks? Like a redirection? Yeah, you can cause a redirection, service disruption using that. You know, we got credential harvesting, we got malware distribution, we got potential RC via log poisoning, bunch of stuff. Now, if you're curious on reading up on more of this, FortSwigger is going to be your best resource. And okay, then I guess you don't get resources. I don't know what happened. I think these slides will be available. Oh, there it goes. Yeah, FortSwigger is your best resource. And this web cache poisoning lab, I have a lot of fun messing with. So if you're interested in these attacks, I recommend checking out any of these resources. Thank you.